Welcome to the Growth Engine, where today we're joined by Neville Vyas, a seasoned marketing specialist with over 3 decades of expertise in asset management, professional services, and FinTech. Currently, the head of EMEA and APAC marketing at Impax Asset Management, Neville is deeply committed to responsible investing, diversity, and social mobility. His distinguished career includes pivotal roles at Allianz Global Investors, AXA Framlington, Fidelity Investments, and PwC, where he has consistently driven profitable sales growth and digital transformation initiatives. A passionate advocate for strategic marketing, Neville has shaped marketing strategies across diverse markets, emphasizing the importance and alignment of marketing with broader business objectives. His work at Impax has been instrumental in navigating the company through significant growth phases, demonstrated by the multiple awards his team has won for their work. Join us as Neville shares his insights into the evolving role of marketing and asset management and his vision for future growth and innovation within the sector. Neville, thank you so much for joining us today. To kick us off, can you share with us your journey in marketing and what led you to your current role at Impax Asset Management?
Sure. I started in this industry in the city, actually. I came out of with a university degree, an economics degree, and my first job was actually a sales job. I was selling economic forecasting tools to FX traders.
Right.
So, I'd walk into the trading floor, which, as you may remember, back in those days, was some of them were the size of football pitches.
Yeah, a noisy environment.
Noisy, lots of bad language. And so that was a baptism of fire for sure. I mean, I had to get the attention of FX traders on a trading floor in the city of London.
Wow.
That's not easy to do.
And whilst they're in the fire.
Whilst they're in the deep, in
Yeah.
in the thick of trading, and and they probably had less than a nanoseconds worth of attention to
Wow.
give me. So actually, there's a marketing lesson there somewhere,
bet
isn't there,
there
for
is.
sure?
I bet there is.
But the
Yeah.
other big lesson was I didn't want to do sales
No.
after that baptism.
Yeah. So then what led you? What was the next move?
Then I simply applied for a job with Fidelity Investments, and I started doing customer service work with
Okay.
Fidelity Investments. That was a formative experience for me. I spoke to something like 50 or 60 individual investors every day.
Retail investors?
Retail
Okay.
investors. Retail investors on their client service lines.
Amazing.
And I did that for 3 years. And I learned a lot about their hopes and fears. And to this day, I never forget. We talk about asset owners in this industry. In practice, they're the real asset owners.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I never forget that. And I also think about regulation and the importance of it, because frankly, a lot of those people were misadvised, not by Fidelity, but by other advisors.
Phenomenal. The opportunity to speak to that many individual investors. How many years ago approximately was that?
That would have been 1992.
Okay. So do you recognize the same problems now about what you were hearing from customers back then?
Oh, good question. I do, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to less retail customers now,
Sure.
apart from friends and family, but their feeling about taking risk, that hasn't changed.
Right.
They want
Yeah.
some return, they want something better than the bank, but they don't really want to take risk.
Yes.
Their desire for income hasn't changed at all. Their feeling about personal finance and the kind of mental load strain that it takes on individuals, that hasn't changed at all. So some things haven't changed, I have to say.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. So after Fidelity, what or did your role change in
My role
Fidelity?
did change, and I started marketing at Fidelity, which was my first foray into marketing.
Okay.
And then after that, I joined a boutique asset management firm called Framlington.
Okay.
And I guess that was the first time I became a marketing leader and led the marketing there. That was a really interesting experience. I was lucky enough to look after both marketing and comms at Framlington. So,
Okay.
we can talk a bit later about how that played out. But a boutique asset management firm, I think, is a great experience for anybody in this industry, because you do tend to see the whole shooting match from end to end in terms of kind of a integrated campaign. So that was it was a great experience.
By that, do you mean that in a boutique you get more control over the whole spectrum of marketing? Because many marketing managers, many folk I speak to, only get to work on one aspect of marketing. Actually, it's a very broad church, marketing in
You're
general.
absolutely right, and I think the people that you've spoken to on this podcast, many of them are they're from the bigger asset management firms, and so they tend to specialize in certain areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, at a boutique firm, you do get to see all sides of it, whether it's digital, whether it's content, whether it's
Yeah.
events or comms. You know, you get the whole breadth of it, and if you can bring that together, and control is important. If you can bring that together and
Yes.
bring some of the stakeholders with you, magical things can happen. And I think in that period, it really did.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Framlington. Where was the next?
Yeah, then from Framlington, I went to Allianz Global Investors, where I
Yeah.
was for nearly 10 years, actually. And that's from a boutique asset management then to one of the world's largest asset managers.
Yeah. Big change.
Big change, big change, big company. But again, I was lucky in as much as I was able to control quite a lot of the marketing aspects at Allianz. But I mean, that firm you might remember it for the brick fund, which we grew from 40 million to something over 1 billion.
Right. Yeah.
There were many others, but it was a period of quite strong growth then, and again, I learned a lot in that time.
Yes. Yeah. And then after Allianz.
After Allianz, I wanted to try to see what the marketing world was like outside of asset management.
Right.
So I joined PwC, a professional services firm, and that was a fantastic experience. I mean, they did look at marketing differently.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's probably more professionalized
Okay.
at,
Okay.
at PwC.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that? Okay, let me phrase this in another way. When you say a bit more professional, are you saying that at that time asset management marketing was less professional or
Yeah, I see where you're getting. I think the difference is that at PwC they definitely focused on the marketing brief more, the
okay,
strategy.
okay,
It happens in asset management. That's good, and it still happened back then, but less so. And
mm,
and with PwC, the firm was so large, so
yeah,
many important stakeholders, the partnership, you kind of had to lay out the journey before you began the journey. So
okay.
you had to get the kind of strategic thinking in place before you started work. They
Mm-mm.
were very good at that.
There's different types of firms. Some firms are marketing led. I guess that was where I was sort of going. I was wondering whether you think PwC is a sort of marketing led firm, and that then I think means that the firm gets behind marketing more. We're going to talk about this coming up. But sometimes marketing's been called disparaging names within companies and is less inclined to believe it as a driver of growth, can be deemed as a colouring in department. So I guess that was where I was leading, but we'll come on to that.
Yeah.
So after PwC,
So then after PwC is where I joined Impax Asset
right?
Management. I took my time. I really wanted to find a business that was did something positive for the environment and the community.
Right.
So I looked for a business that was somehow at the intersection of investments because that interests me. I'm an economist
Yeah,
by
yeah,
training.
yeah.
Did something good for the world, and also, of course, had marketing involved.
Right.
So, luckily for me, I found a job that was absolutely perfect.
And how? So when? Just to get my bearings, when did you leave PwC? How long have you been at
So I've
Impax?
been at Impax 5 years.
Right.
So
Right.
5 years ago, I left PwC, a little bit longer than that, and I've been at Impax 5 years now.
Fantastic. Great. So we're up to date. Thank you very much for giving us that background. Let's go back to what I was just mentioning about the colouring in department stereotype. You must have heard that
I've heard
phrase.
it.
It drives me up the wall, to be honest, and that was the sole reason why I decided to launch this podcast, to try and start surfacing good practice within marketing. But I personally believe marketing can be a growth driver within businesses. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you mentioned marketing and strategy and key parts of the business. What are your views there?
Yeah, that's so important to me personally because I've just seen what happens when you don't get the strategy right.
Yeah,
And so much goes wrong. There's so much editing involved and so much tension involved when you haven't got the strategy right. So the colouring in department, it's a bit disparaging. I mean, I don't hear that phrase much. I
oh, that's good.
sometimes I use it myself sometimes when I don't want to do the work and say, look, we do the colouring in. Like you can
Yeah,
somebody else can do that. Um, but seriously, the strategic part of marketing is absolutely fundamental. And I think about people like Mark Ritson, and I think you have maybe
I've done the
done
course.
the course.
Yeah, I haven't done the brand one. I've just
Right.
done the marketing one. Yeah.
You and I are the same. I haven't done the brand one, but I have to say that was, a real eye opener for me.
Yeah.
When many years after, working in marketing, I did the Mark Ritson mini MBA,
Mm,
and a lot of my thinking somehow came out there, and it sort of affirmed what I'd been thinking about
yeah.
getting strategy right. The point I'm making is that at the beginning of any kind of marketing journey, whatever you're producing, big campaign or something small like a video
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
brochure or a fact sheet, we really have to pause as marketeers and say, look, who's the target audience?
Yeah.
What's important to them? What are the messages that we need to land in this piece of work? What do they know about our business? What do they need to know about our business? Um, what worries them in the world of investment? What kind of investor are they? A foundation, an endowment, a fund selector, a pension manager? So really understanding the audience and really understanding what you're trying to achieve, that conversation has to happen. It's really important that it's written down before
Yeah.
you begin producing anything. And it doesn't need to be a novel.
No.
2 or 3 pages will do, but just write down the strategic brief, have that conversation, and then begin the journey. And if you don't, you can end up in all kinds
Yeah.
of pickles.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some fabulous stuff there to unpick. I love the fact about championing for actual getting a brief and writing a brief down clearly. I think there's a skill set just there in its own, which all marketers should actually be taught. There are some great resources for that as well. But I also think that you're by thinking about the actual audience first, coming from their perspective. That's great advice. That so many times my where I came into this world was from the world of video, and so many times we'd work for organizations that would say I want to create a video, and it would be their chance to sort of have this PR piece where they're just speaking about themselves and broadcasting it to the world, not thinking about how the message is being received on the other end. So I believe you're saying the same thing, being an
I'm saying the
advocate.
same thing. There's a temptation for lots of people, salespeople, portfolio managers in particular, to go straight to the tactic. And
Yeah.
it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
They want to amplify their voice.
Yes.
And so their knee-jerk solution might be, Neville, we need to do some blogs. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
When can we start the blogs? We need to do a video because I've seen that Schroeder's video and it looked great. And they
Yeah.
often do look great. But going straight to the tactics isn't the starting point,
No.
right? They are tactics, as you know,
Yeah.
whether it's social media, videos, all that sort of stuff. Those are tactics. So really the question I have to ask them is, what's the business problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Oh, Neville, they don't know that we have a great emerging markets team. Okay. Who's the they? French investors? Well, not French investors. No, no, no. Those other investors. Well, tell me a bit about those investors.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then that conversation begins about what you're really trying to do. Once that conversation has happened and it's written down, we could reflect in that moment and say, actually, blogs aren't the answer.
Yeah.
There's a different set of tactics here that might bring the solution that we need. It's not a blog. It's
Yes.
maybe an event. It's maybe a roadshow. It's maybe a video. It's maybe something on social media. There's a lot of tactics that we can use,
Yeah.
but starting with the tactic is not the best way to begin. And the problem that some of the issues that marketing people have is that we immediately hear the tactic and start managing an event. We
Yeah.
start with events or start with a video and we forget to take a moment to think, is that the right tactic or not?
Can you add a bit of color here? Talking of coloring department, can you give me any examples of strategic initiatives that you've led or been involved in?
We talked about Framlington, the boutique asset manager. That's a good example, I think, of growing a brand. I was there for 6 years, and I think in that time we almost doubled assets. Not always because of the marketing. We had great portfolio managers as well, but that's a good example of integrated marketing campaigns. I think whatever we did, we tried to integrate the marketing and the comms and the client service and the content. We brought it all together and really thought strategically right from the beginning. So we were able to integrate our messages. And if you do that again and again over a 6 year period,
Yeah.
you can really add value to the business. I mean, the business was bought for £200 million by AXA investment managers. If you want to talk about the value of a brand. I mean, there
Fabulous.
it is in cash terms. Of
Yeah.
course, they bought a whole business, including the portfolio managers. But I think the Framlington brand then went on to last beyond 10 years in the AXA umbrella.
Right.
And I was very flattered to hear that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that until recently.
That's
I spoke
great.
to my friends at AXA. Oh, yeah, Neville, we're still using the Framlington brand. It's actually still being used within AXA to this day.
Wow.
So this is almost
Amazing.
18 years later. So I feel very proud that
Yeah,
whatever
rightly
that
so.
brand means to people, somebody's chosen to hang on to it.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of, I think, a brand that has meaning behind it.
Yes. Yeah. And is there another initiative perhaps impacts you? I think with globalizing the role of marketing within impacts. Is there anything you can
Yeah,
say
when
about
I
that?
joined, that was one of the challenges that we were given. We had a marketing team in London and a marketing team in the United States of America on
Right.
the East Coast, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And my brief uh, was with the head of marketing in the United States, Sarah Grennan, to bring the two teams together and globalize them. So now we have globalized them. We have a global digital team. We
Right.
have a global events team. We have a global marketing product team. We have a global production team. And we have a global design team. The only local part of the marketing mix is the channel marketing area, and I
Okay.
think that probably should be local. That works very well. So Sarah Grennan looks after her kind of local sales team, if you like, with her channel marketing team, and I do the same for the rest of the world.
You say that was a requirement when you landed the role at Impacts. How do you actually go about globalizing it? Because it sounds very easy to say, but I imagine there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears involved in actually achieving that.
Yeah, there was blood, sweat, and tears, but actually the journey wasn't as difficult as I thought it might be,
Okay.
because Impax is a relatively it's a good size to be able to do that kind of work.
Right.
It's not a behemoth in terms of asset management. It's a big asset management firm, but it hasn't got hundreds of thousands of employees. At the time, something like 120.
Okay.
So size helped. The backing of senior leadership helped as well.
Yeah.
It's not an initiative that I had. The whole business wanted to globalize their marketing function, and it just made financial sense as well.
Mm.
I mean, globalization often means efficiencies. So because I had the backing of senior leadership, it worked okay. Cultural differences for sure. So, I went over to the United States, and my counterpart came over to London. And so we kind of got to know the whole team on both sides of the Atlantic. So that helped a lot as well.
Bearing in mind you had just come out of PwC, massive global business, previous being in the boutique, do you think your experiences at PwC prepared you for making that transition to a global team quite smooth?
I think it did. I think it did because PwC were very good at stakeholder management. If you
Yeah.
think of the partnership structure at a professional services organization, those partners are very powerful people.
Mm-hmm.
Often each partner will have 200 or 300 people working for them. And I had 13 partners
Yeah.
to do the marketing for. Stakeholder management mattered a lot. So just sort of the way that was done is important.
Yeah.
That that helped a great deal.
Yeah, I can see that. I can understand that coming out of one environment into that next, you probably sailed through, not sailed through. I don't mean to belittle, but yeah, it probably eased it. You could probably see the routes that you needed to take clearly.
Yes, I mean, one thing I did fairly early on at Impax was I sort of played the quick win card, and I hired a good designer
Right.
fairly early on.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to overplay the colouring in department thing, but actually, if you can show people what high quality design looks like
Yeah.
fairly quickly, then you win a lot of credibility quite quickly.
Yes.
So I hired a good designer, and immediately people could see that our brochureware was stylish, and
Yes.
our
Yeah.
website page was stylish, and our collateral just looked good.
Mm,
And that's something that can happen quite quickly. If you buy a new technology system, it might be 18 months before you can use it properly.
yeah.
But a few quick wins helped my journey, I have to say.
Well, I think things like that then start to build momentum, build belief in the marketing team. They can start to see how, okay, this team, this department's actually supporting us in other areas of the business. So anything in life, you need to get momentum to get it moving, don't you?
You do,
So
and a little bit of early buy-in early on as
yeah.
well, and that really did help.
That leads us nicely into the next part that I'm keen to talk about, and this is shall we say that the doing of the role of marketing, the more the operational side, and thing that I know that you've noticed, but we speak to a lot of people on this podcast about is the ever expanding array of martech that's out there. There seems to be new tools coming out every day. I know I've been on the Ritson program. They don't teach you how to choose marketing technology suppliers, but it's a key part, especially of senior roles. The other part that I'm interested in is that you often have to deal with a wide variety of suppliers, from very large organizations down to small agencies, and I'm just wondering how you navigate that yourself, how you learn those skills, and how you pass those skills onto your team members.
That's a really good question. Let me let's think about that in two parts. The
Yep.
technology side.
Yep.
So, I've listened to your podcast. I think they're fascinating. I
Thank
have
you.
to say, David, I've learned quite a lot just listening to the conversations that you've
Me
had with
too.
other marketing leaders. But one thing that's coming across quite clearly is the involvement of technology in marketing. Now we are buying technology to help us go about the business of marketing, to professionalize it, to make it more efficient, faster, lower error rates, all the good things that technology can bring. So marketing leaders in particular will have to buy some technology. Big deals with Salesforce, with Marketo, with Seismic. Um, you're right, that isn't in the marketing handbook. How to do
No.
that isn't in the marketing handbook. It wasn't in my economics degree. I've never been taught how to do that. So that is a skill that somehow needs to get learnt quite quickly. Um, I think my advice is to make sure that you've got a clear brief, and the marketing skill in writing a brief will help with that.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do? Make sure you kind of quote out the job. There are technology suppliers, there are lots of technology suppliers kind of broadly do the same thing. Have lots of conversations, and off the back of those conversations early on, you can finesse the brief.
Mm.
You don't know what they can do. They will tell you what they did for some of the biggest asset managers in the world, and you'll say, "Oh, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
me just adjust the brief a little bit because I'd like one of those too."
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let that conversation happen
That's a great tip.
for a
So it's
while.
like an evolving brief. Get it down, but then be prepared that you may have to adapt as you
You may
go.
have to adapt. Keep an open
Yeah.
mind. There'll be a point when you say, "Okay, I think I know what we want now and what you guys are capable of," and then you can start having the negotiations and negotiating with suppliers. These are expensive pieces of kit,
Yes.
so somewhere along the line you need to sort of learn how to negotiate.
Yeah.
And that's not in the handbook.
Is that side something that you kind of pick up on the job? Is there training that you've had in any of the roles that you've had previously?
It so happens I have had training in
Have you?
negotiating skill,
Right.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the European School of Management Technology in Berlin. I was
Right.
flown out to spend a bit of time there to do a negotiating course, and that helped a bit. But I have to say, mainly it's on the job.
Yeah.
But what I do now is with my team, I take them with me when I do some level of negotiation,
Yeah.
and they might pick up some skills along the way, but I make that part of the learning journey within my team.
Right.
How to work with suppliers. I mean, just getting on to the second part of the question
Yes.
and
Yeah.
talking about suppliers, I think right now I probably work with 25 different agencies
Right.
of
Wow.
one kind or another, big and
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to bring the best out of them
Yeah.
at a reasonable price. I don't want any more or less than that. Get the best out of your agencies at a reasonable price, brief them clearly, and enjoy yourself along the way.
Yeah.
So that's a skill in itself, and that actually takes. I think you can only really learn that on the job.
No, but can you give me an example of any of the agency suppliers and pieces of work that you're working on currently?
Yeah, I can do. You'll know that content production is really important in asset management. Listening to the podcasts that you've been hosting over the last few months, the leaders that you've spoken to all talk about the content that they produce, and interesting content's super important. At Impax, we produce a lot of interesting content, really focused on the transition to a more sustainable economy in particular, because that's what we do. Um, what's important for marketing people is that content gets the attention it deserves,
Yeah, the right
the
eyeballs.
right eyeballs, and that can be quite difficult because engagement rates can be quite low across the industry. So we work with businesses like Asset TV, for example. When we do our video work, they help us produce the videos. Lots of people can do that. I think their unique strength is the size of their database. They have a database of 600,000 professional investors around the world. So I don't think any asset management firm has a database that size. So when we produce something that's video based, then they can help us distribute that.
And a great partnership that you've got working together with your internal team and relying on external expertise to do a part that you haven't got that expertise in.
Exactly. We're not the best people to manage a database of 600,000 people.
Yeah.
Asset TV do a good job of that.
Any other partners?
Yeah, I mean, data visualization is a topic that's come up in your podcasts in the past,
Yeah.
and you know, bringing data to life is increasingly important, particularly on websites. We've partnered with a business called Instinct Digital that
Okay.
are experts in data visualization and bringing data to life, particularly on websites.
Oh,
So,
great.
over the coming months, you'll start to see the Impax websites have areas where we're able to display the best of our product range in a really tidy format. So we're going to build a fund center
Right.
with Instinct Digital, and we're also going to build a preference center with Instinct Digital as well. So a couple of projects there that I'm really excited about that are in play at the moment.
Great, great. Whilst we're on the subject of data visualization, I have to call out one of my LinkedIn heroes, James Eagle. I don't know if you've seen.
I have seen his work.
He's
Yeah.
just absolutely fantastic. So he's my data visualization crush, if I'm allowed.
I have to say, for a lot of us as well. No, he does great work actually, and it's reminded me of another business that we're starting to work with at the moment, a brand new business called Markets Recon.
Right.
And again, they help get content, the right content, in front of the right people.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about the work we're doing because, as I say, we produce a lot of content.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of thought. Really proud of the work we do at Impax, the content that we produce. Some of it's award winning. I'm really proud of that as well. Our comms team just do an incredible amount of doing incredible work in producing really interesting insights, and we get a lot of good feedback on the insights. I want it to get in front of the right people.
Yeah, that's so good to hear because so many people get so focused in, and like what we are talking about earlier, the tactical side of things, if I can get that word out. They get involved in the sort of day-to-day, create the content, and then it's done, and then they're on to the next thing. They forget about actually getting the eyeballs on there, because if no one sees it, there's little point in it. So it's good to hear. I want to go back to the marketing tech piece, if I may, because as I was listening to you, it struck me that choosing the right kit, for want of a better word, is one part, but the implementation of that is actually dealing with another component of the job, which is how do you go about organizational transformation? Because when the marketing technology often touches more than just the marketing department itself. So what's your views on how you navigate those waters?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's not easy to get that right. Look,
Yeah.
the salespeople at the technology teams will tell you that it takes 2 days to implement, right? That's a fantasy. It doesn't.
Yeah.
No technology takes 2 days to implement a big
No.
piece of technology. In those moments, I say, well, that's good. Can you come with me and implement it?
Yes.
Like,
Okay.
buy the implementation with the technology if you can. Don't spend £100,000 on the technology. Spend £70,000, and with that little bit of extra funds that you have, buy the skill to implement it well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, that's really important. So either let that come with the deal. At that point, they'll often say, "Oh, that's another £30,000," and you're like,
Yeah.
"Hold on a minute, how does it £30,000 when you told me it takes 2 days to implement? Which
Yes.
one is it?
Yeah.
Either it takes 2 days or it takes 6 months. Come on."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So if they come with you, then you'll find the implementation smoother.
That's
Be
interesting.
realistic about the implementation. They will tell you all kinds of things,
Yeah.
and I think they're just sometimes a little bit overconfident in that respect.
How much is involved in sort of selling the strategy up the business, but also selling the strategy down the business as well? How much is
So important. Of course,
Yeah,
stakeholder management for sure. When you're looking to spend budget on a serious investment,
yeah,
stakeholder management higher up is really important. But yeah, across the piece, actually, having the sales team buy into that technology, whether it's Salesforce or Marketo
yeah,
or Seismic, that's really important. And that can take time, and that's a cultural shift. And that journey is absolutely essential because I have seen cases where businesses have bought technology, and I've been part of these firms, and the technology collects dust,
yes,
or
yeah,
it just uses 10% of its power. And
yeah.
that's a real shame.
Yeah, I've spoken to technology suppliers that put in implementation of tools, and sometimes not, sometimes it's taken so much effort, energy, time to get the kit installed, and it does take sometimes over a year or two, and then people are exhausted and they kind of move on to the next thing, and yeah, those you must have seen that as
I've seen
well.
that many times. And actually, I talked about my first hire being a quick win. It was a design person, and people immediately saw the results.
Yeah,
My second hire was somebody that could use the technology that we had already bought.
yeah, yeah,
We bought the technology, we were using 10% of it, and I
yes,
hired an expert in that particular technology, and she transformed our marketing automation
fantastic.
across the Impax marketing team.
That's great then, because then you've got the double hit, haven't you? You've had the kind of design, look and feel, but then you're speeding up the operational efficiency as well. So I can see why you're still at Impacts. Let's talk about balancing tactical needs with strategic goals. It's a point you raised previously. Impacts has gone through rapid growth in your tenure. How have you balanced those? You've got immediate tactical needs that are coming to you from the business, but in your mindset, you've also got to keep in shape the business long-term strategic goals. Can you give me some examples of challenges that you faced during that period of growth at Impacts that sort of brings that subject to life a bit more for
Sure,
us?
yeah. Philosophically, when we plan, I'm experienced enough now to know that there are a lot of known unknowns that will come my way.
Yeah.
COVID. I didn't predict it. None of
No.
us predicted it.
Yeah.
But what we typically do is leave a bit of space for those known unknowns, those surprises that come our way. We're in
Mm,
asset management, so stock markets go up and down. There'll be surprises, whether it's oil shocks or wars, geopolitical things,
yeah.
political matters, and we need to react to those. So
Yeah.
our clients deserve a quick reaction, a quick response to what's happening in the marketplace. That should be no surprise
Mm,
to marketing teams. So I try to leave space for those so we
yeah.
can jump on those quite quickly,
Yeah.
deliver the kind of client service that they deserve, and at the same time in the background keep going on our long-term strategic objectives.
Mm,
If you throw everything at the long-term strategic objectives and you've got no time to do on the ground reactions and on the ground work with your clients, then you do end up in a bit of a pickle and it causes a stress. So I think what we try and do is just make space for the known unknowns.
that's such an interesting point. I was speaking to advisors that say when these world events happen, their phones are going off going crazy because their clients are calling up going, what do I do? What do I do? And they look to asset managers to give them collateral to send out to their clients to keep everyone at peace and calm down and the world still turns. And so you're it's so interesting hearing it from your perspective, accepting that these black swan moments happen more often than we would like, and giving yourself the bandwidth to be able to deal with that whilst keeping in mind with the long-term goals of the
Exactly that,
business.
yeah. And it shouldn't be a surprise to any marketing person that stuff happens in the world of stock markets and stuff happens in the world of politics, and
No.
we're always ready to talk about those.
Yes, yeah. It's I was listening to Rest of Politics on the way in this morning and listening to the surprise of Trump coming in, and there was but equally there was a chap on there who was had boots on the ground in the US and had called it 2 days before because he had just been gone out there speaking to people. So it amazes me that there's there's so much surprise of something which, if you've actually been out in the US, you probably could have got a sense of it anyway. But certainly in the UK, it seemed to come as a complete shock.
It did. I think that's a good example of looking at the rational data rationally versus a little bit of hope for a lot
Yeah,
of people.
yeah,
There's quite a gap there sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Um, so let's talk about when we're staying in strategy, um, approach to team structure. How do you manage your team to cope with strategic requirements, both long term, short term, that come at you?
Well, I've talked about the 6 pillars that we use at Impax across the global team, most of which is now globalized, and the local teams dealing with work on the ground locally. I think what's really important is empowerment. So the co-leader of the marketing team, Sarah, and myself, we're pretty. I would say we want to make sure that the people that work in our teams feel very empowered to go about their business. So we give them the confidence to go and do what they need to do. They are experts in their field. That's why they were hired and trained in that way. So I think a high level of empowerment is important. You don't want to be told what to do all the time.
Mm,
Given the goal, given the tools and the training,
trust them to get on
and
with
then
it.
trust them to get on with it. That
Yeah, yeah,
that really works, I think.
yeah, yeah. It's good to hear that. How would you allocate resources to individual departments to make sure that you're sitting there managing the long-term direction, but equally being prepared for the short-term surprises? How do you go about setting out with your team the spread across the 6 areas of
It's
business?
always a challenge. It's always a challenge. We stay close to the sales team,
Yeah.
as close as we possibly can get. They will have sales priorities, frankly, and we can't promote everything all the time to all regions. So in the end, we need to understand what are the top 3 or 4 products that we want to bring to the market.
Mm, mm.
What are the top 3 or 4 regions, countries that we need to talk to?
Yeah.
Within all of that, the audience types, is it mainly endowments or family offices or fund selectors
Mm,
or
mm, mm.
pension funds? There's somewhere in that there's a kind of matrix of audience, geography, product type. We do need to lay that out. That's what I spend my time doing, and making sure that aligns with the overall business goals. Once you've done that, it's easier to then let those priorities flow down into campaigns, and then therefore the work that the team need to do.
Mm, mm. I'm going to ask you a question here, which I'm intrigued by to get your response. And I know that you've done the Mark Ritson program as well. So within that, Mark talks about uh, understand first the strategic goals of the business. Once you've understood strategic goals of the business, your job as a marketer is to put together the strategy to solve the strategic goals of the business. At that point, you work out how much that's going to cost from a budget point of view, and then you take that to the business. Majority of the time that I see within the work that I've been involved in is that the budget is dictated by the business in order to do its strategic goals. For me, there's this mismatch. And when we talk about removing the stigma of the colouring in department, it feels to me that until there is a balance and a understanding of what marketing can generally do to drive the growth of the business, it's we're going to be having that imbalance. In your career, have you seen that friction play out, and have you got any advice for how you for other fellow marketers for how they can have that strategic conversation?
I do understand the conundrum there.
Yeah,
When I joined Impax, and when I've joined asset managers in the past, I'm often asked the open question, Neville, what does it cost to make us famous,
yeah.
to make us well known in a particular market with a particular topic, or just generally as a business? What does it cost? I can give them an answer. They don't always like the answer
No.
because it can run into the millions if you're
Yeah,
talking about a global business.
yeah.
So it can work both ways, David. I can put together a strategic plan. Before I put together the the strategic plan. I will go to the leadership and say, look, do we have £50 to spend, or do we have £500,000, or do we have 5 million?
Yeah.
Give me a rough idea of what you think this business can afford because we want to be well known in Japan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I understand the brief. We want to be well known in Japan. That's clear with this particular audience. Do you have a sense of the budget? If they say, look, honestly, Neville, 5 million is too much, but a few 100,000 we can invest into that.
Yeah.
That's okay. That gives me some kind of guide rails. If there's silence, if they say, Neville, you're the marketing expert, you tell us, I will tell them.
Yeah.
I will tell them. And there's enough research in this industry now to be able to understand what it costs to be famous, whatever that means in any particular country at any particular time. Business is like research in finance. Excellent research firm for the asset management community. That'll be my first phone call.
Yeah.
What does it cost, guys? And I can give them the answer. They don't always like the answer.
No.
So then the conversation starts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen so many times the conversations that start with, if money's no objective, give me an idea what's possible. And and then I see clients go and spend, a lot of time putting together proposals for people to go, but that's never going to happen. We haven't got 4 or 5 million to spend, and it's I just find that a friction point within the business that is still not yet solved. But
I think you're right. Look, I've personally spent £4 million in a 4-month period in the ISA season at Fidelity Investments, for example. £4 million in 4 months.
Yeah.
So you can spend wisely that kind of money, and I will play that back to whoever's asking me about budgets. I've also built campaigns for £15,000, quite substantial to the professional market, and they look good and they do the job. There is quite a range of options, isn't there? I guess that is the skill of the marketing person fairly early on to get that part right. Otherwise, you can just go off at a tangent.
I like how you're framing it though, because what you're, if I'm correct in understanding, you're saying to the business, be respectful of my time but just give me the parameters, because I want to deliver. My role as marketing director is to deliver the best strategy for the business, but give me the parameters to work in, because I need to also understand what is commercially viable from a marketing perspective. So it seems to me having that two-way dialogue and is a sensible way forward.
You put it really well there, David. Be respectful of my time is, I mean, that's a great phrase. Some people think I asked them to complete the marketing brief as some kind of application form.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've got to complete Neville's application form for us to get anything done. And it's not an application form. It's so that I spend my time wisely, and the time of my team.
Let's move on from the budgets and let's move into another area of innovation. And I know that again, this is kind of tied into the technology conversation we are having before, but there's a lot of innovations in marketing that's happening. The industry seems to be evolving at a rapid speed. We've also got the problem within the industry of legacy technology as well, which sort of, in one hand, we're trying to race ahead, but we're also tied around the ankles with a chain behind us. What has been your experience that you can talk through of programs that you've put in, whether it's technology or innovation within the business that you're pushing forward on within your own team or within your own department?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I can give you an example of a sort of a trial that we're running with our US intermediary team.
Great.
It's a digitally focused campaign. I'm just reflecting on a podcast that you did with the team at BNY Mellon, I think it was. Charlotte Lamb.
Yes.
I mean, that was a really great conversation because the work that she and her team were doing in, I think it's Spain they picked.
Yeah.
Similarly, we're picking a relatively small audience in one region, and
Great.
we are doing some kind of a digital campaign, a digital first campaign that involves client scoring.
Yeah.
It involves looking at the engagement of those clients through our digital assets, our websites, and our content that's online, reacting to that engagement that we're having, doing the kind of automated follow-up emails, and bringing clients through the funnel, through
Mm.
the buying funnel, just using digital engagements from our side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a really fascinating piece of work led by our head of digital, who's really transformed, who will transform, continue to transform the work we're doing. But I think that sort of that
Mm.
test case is going to be really interesting.
Fantastic.
You talk about legacy systems.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that globally in one go, not
Mm-mm-mm.
least because of legacy
Yeah.
systems.
I remember the conversation with Charlotte very, very well. And her whole approach was based around small pilot program so that you not only learn the process, learn, and she's very accepting of learning by mistakes as well, allowing the team to make mistakes and do a little bit of trial and error, but getting to a point of discovering what works, and she's now in the process of amplifying that across Europe. So presumably what you're saying is that you're taking a similar approach, sort of start small and then learn. And
Exactly that, a pilot's program.
yeah.
That's the word I was looking for. And that is exactly what we're doing. That's the right way to do it, because no matter what has happened within another asset management firm, we're all a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so it is important to just see whether that pilot's going to work for your particular sales team. Often marketing people will assume the sales team want more leads.
Yeah.
I've produced leads for salespeople and put it on their desk, and they said, "Yeah, Neville, great leads. Thanks. I'll get onto those one day." They never do.
Yeah.
I really should have said, if I gave you 100 leads, how would that help you? Would you be
Mm.
able to do anything with them seriously, given that you're a very busy person?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
often they go, "Yeah, well, let's talk about those leads, Neville." That's
Yes.
okay, because then I can take those leads, bring them back into the marketing world, and keep nurturing those leads. Then you're really adding value.
Do you see there's like lead generation in kind of two ways? One, in-person sales leads pushing over perhaps higher tier clients possibly, versus digital leads, higher volume. Is that lower value, or is it just a numbers game? So you nurture them digitally until they're ready to pass over to a
Probably the latter. I think
yeah.
nurturing prospects and clients digitally until they're ready to hand over to our
Yes.
sales team. Impax are an institutional asset manager largely.
Mm.
We only deal with professional investors. So relationships matter.
Yeah.
So in the end, when they're investing large amounts of money for their clients, understandably, our clients will want to talk to someone and
Mm.
have a relationship with them, meet the portfolio managers. And I think that only happens when there's a business development person alongside them.
Yeah.
Not all of it can happen digitally in the institutional space in particular.
I know that again, it's something that you talked about at the beginning of our conversation. Diversity, inclusion, very, very important to you. Something you believe passionately about, and you spend a lot of time working in and promoting the importance of that within marketing and marketing teams. How can you give us an idea of how you go about doing that, and why you think it's an issue within the industry?
Let me start with the why. In this industry, many industries, but in particular with asset management, we're all trying to outthink each other. Marketing departments are trying to outthink the next marketing department. Investors, typically investors, portfolio managers, are always trying to outthink the market.
Yeah.
You can't really outthink the market if the people that you hire are from the same backgrounds and the same school and the same university with the same types of degree, and they think the same way.
Right.
Well, people are all different, so there's always differences. But on the whole, if you're just hiring the same types of people, you're just going to get the same types of solutions.
Right. Right.
If you want diversity of answers, diversity of solutions, I really do think you need to look across humanity,
Mm.
all of us, and see if you can access some of the talent pools that are not being accessed right now. That's why I think it's
Right.
important.
Right. You're driving that from a recruitment perspective throughout the whole of the industry, or specifically within marketing teams?
Personally, I can only influence marketing
Yeah.
teams and my particular marketing team, so I'm working hard on that. The asset management industry is also working hard on that, but I think we need to do a bit more. I mean, just looking at the number of female portfolio managers. Citywire data will tell us that 12.1% of
Yeah.
portfolio managers are female. Looking at the 25,000 funds that they looked at, that's a pretty low figure.
Right. Mm.
12.1%. Half the world is female.
Yeah.
That's a lot of talent we're missing out on, surely.
Mm.
When I speak to the recruiters, they say, well, look, Neville, I'm just being fair. I just recruit the people that are in front of me. And they do. They sincerely don't try to avoid women. They
Yeah.
don't try to avoid people of colour. They just try and be fair and have a sensible conversation at an interview, and they hire. Of
Sure.
course, what has it led to? Mainly hiring men,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that would be an okay thing if in fact men were genetically better at running money than women. I don't think that's the case. Do you think that's the
No, I
case?
don't think I think there's even been, I think there's, I've seen research, which some of our team have surfaced, which is um, comparing, this is retail investors, women retail investors versus male retail investors, and women retail investors coming out higher in performance data. So,
Well, that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
I've seen a bit of that research and into the professional sphere as well. But let's assume men and women are equally as good
yeah,
at managing money, then something else is happening, given that we've only got a small percentage of women in those jobs.
yeah,
What's happening? Something else is going on. And we've got the brains in this industry to figure out what the problem is. I mean, we can build trading systems, we can make money for investors, we can do complicated marketing initiatives. We must have the brains to figure out how to access the talent that we are missing out on. You can also apply that theory to, not theory, that fact that we're missing out on talent to people of color.
yeah,
You
yeah.
can apply it to all kinds of minority groups. You can apply it to people from poorer backgrounds, working class people. I mean, social mobility is really important to me as well. That's a whole area that I think of talent that I think we're missing out on as well.
Why is that important obviously it's a key area for us, but I know that from speaking to you previously, there's deep reasons there that are very close to your heart.
Well, I came from a typical, if there is such a thing, a typical immigrant background.
Yeah,
My mum came here when in the 60s. She started life in a bedsit in Bayswater with £4 in her pocket. I only found that out recently. I didn't realise she only had £4. And a few years later, she was moved into a council block of flats, top floor, with no lift. And that's where she brought up her two children, myself and my brother. So, I've come from a background that wasn't necessarily conducive to getting a job in finance very quickly. It worked out for us, and I think we had a lot of help from wider society. And if I can similarly help people in the same way, then they can access talent that hasn't been accessed before.
I'm slightly lost at the thought of the how you go about getting on with the day when you've got £4 in your pocket. It must be absolutely terrifying. The resilience to get up and get on. I mean, you don't have a choice, obviously, but she must have been an extremely tough, strong woman to raise two boys and get out there and
Hats off
make
to
ends
her,
meet.
and millions of immigrants like her around the world. Somehow they've drawn on their reserves of resilience. Maybe that's filtered through to their children. I know resilience matters in our professionally in our job, so maybe there's something there.
Do you think that the background and seeing what your mother went through led you to taking your choices within your career from subjects that you studied at university to the industries that you worked within? Is that a
If you
line?
if you ask my mother, she'd be a little bit disappointed that I'm not a doctor, as you can imagine, right? So I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, mother. So I don't think she would have expected that kind of career pathway.
Yeah,
To be honest, I'm not sure how it affected my choices.
right.
I do know that she personally wanted her children to be well educated. I
Mm,
think at that point she could let go a bit after we've got some level of decent education.
mm.
She she would have been happy with that. But education was for sure important to my mother.
Do you think that asset managers as an industry ought to do more collectively to promote financial education within the countries that they operate in?
I do. I think financial education is so important. I mean, I talked about my conversations that I had at Fidelity Investments and just talking to those retail clients
Yeah,
and how much they would have benefited if they understood personal finance a little bit more.
yeah.
You know, there's so many missteps along the way, elderly people that have just invested in places they shouldn't have been. So personal finance education is important. I also think asset management can do a lot, financial services can do a lot more, bringing out the talent in from people with poorer backgrounds or working class backgrounds. Businesses like Progress Together, I think, are making incredible steps in the right direction to do that. So there are initiatives. I think we need to go further and faster.
Interesting. The, staying on the subject of diversity, you're talking about the influence that you have within your own team, pulling pulling individuals from diverse backgrounds so you build up a team which is stronger and able to build and think differently to give them a competitive advantage against the competition. So there's a commercial reason there as well. How do you then go about leading that team, building out their education within their roles? Because it's there are obviously marketing programs. We talked about Mark Ritson, but there's few ones which are marketing within the asset management industry. So how do you actually go about shaping your team and taking on that leadership role and nurturing them through their careers?
You know, I think if you've taken the time to hire people from diverse backgrounds, you should take the time to listen to them
Yes.
because it's easy to kind of talk over them because I'm more experienced than the whole team. And so I can talk for England, as you're now seen, right? And senior leaders have got a lot of experience and they're kind of good at talking. I think we need to just take a moment to let them speak and just let them be heard.
Thinking of listeners on the podcast that may be at the beginning of their careers, um, and how they want to get on in the world and get up the marketing ladder, so to speak. What would your advice be to those?
Let me turn it around and think about the attributes I look for when I'm hiring.
Okay.
There's the obvious, I'm looking for someone bright and energetic and kind of wants to get into marketing, but I'm actually often looking for detectives. When you work in a very big firm,
I love that phrase. I
it's
haven't
not
heard that
easy.
before.
It's not easy to know who does what and how they do it. PwC, 120,000 people. You need to be a bit of a detective to find
Great.
out where to even start the project that you've been given. Who's good? Who's going to help me? How can I bring this team together? Has anybody done this before? Asking lots of questions and having the grit and stamina to sort of navigate the organization to get a full understanding of who can help you and who can't help you and what you're trying to achieve and all those kind of questions. So a detective work is really important. And actually, I'm explicit about it. I'm kind of looking for somebody that could be a good detective. Their sort of back straightens a little bit, and they think, well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. That's true. I've never heard that phrase before, but it's that's superb. That's a great insight.
Well, on the point of attributes that I look for as well, or what helps people succeed in marketing, I think a level of professional curiosity does matter. So
Mm-mm-mm.
don't accept what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Ask the question, why is that on the website? It's been
Mm.
there a long time, and why is that bit of information there? Because I've noticed that other asset managers
Yeah.
don't have that bit of information, or there's kind of some gaps in what we
Mm.
when we display the content on our website or our fact sheets or our brochures. Other asset managers have active share. We
Yeah.
don't have active share,
Why is
for
that?
example. Why is that?
Yeah.
Just ask the question.
Yeah.
And the answer may be that, oh, you know what, I think we probably need that to have that piece of data there,
Mm.
or there may be a good reason for it, but keep asking the questions, I think, and be professionally curious. That's so important.
I've got one more note, Neville, if I can just quiz you on one last point, and then I'll let you go, I promise. Um, I've heard you talk about presentation training and the moment of trust, and again, that's something that I know presenting is a key part of the business, about winning hearts and minds as you go. But presentation training, is that something that you encourage your team to do?
It's something we think about quite a lot
Okay.
because it is, in the institutional world, often the moment of truth. So
Okay.
marketing people can build brands and help clients go down the buying funnel. And somewhere towards the end of that funnel, there is a moment of truth where the asset owner will sit down with the portfolio manager and say, talk to me about your portfolio.
Yeah.
How'd you
Okay.
go about the business?
Yeah. And that's crunch time.
That's crunch time. I've got a lot of money that we need running and running well. Talk to me about how you go about that business. That's crunch time.
Yeah.
So we want to get that moment right. I actually don't overtrain our portfolio managers. I just give them very simple advice, which is be authentic.
Yeah.
Just be sincere and be yourself. Impax itself as a business scores quite high when it comes to authenticity. It's something that our clients see as a really strong attribute for Impax. I don't want to lose that by putting a layer of spin on top of that.
No.
So be authentic. What I do advise them to do is to make sure they stick to the points that are important to the person they're presenting to, the asset owner. So before the presentation, my hope is that the salesperson, the client service person will talk to the asset owner and say, tell us what's important.
Yes.
We're going to see you for 45 minutes next Wednesday. I want that time to be meaningful to you. Here are the kind of things we can talk about. What in that list of agenda points is meaningful to you?
Yeah.
Do you want us to talk about our offices around the world and all the staff that we have? Or would you like to get straight to the risk controls or straight to the what's inside the portfolio and how you make those decisions?
Yeah.
So then the meeting will start by saying, oh, my colleagues have told me that you're particularly interested in our risk controls. So I'm going to get straight to that.
Yeah.
Talk to you about how we do risk control. And then if there's time, I can tell you about all the offices we have around the world. That's a meaningful meeting.
It is, and it reminds me of we were talking about this point in a different way, but it's being respectful of their time as well.
It's the same thing.
And it's a great way to go into a meeting for that other person thinking, actually, they've taken the time to find out what it is I want, respecting my time. So already you've made a good impression.
Absolutely right. Look at that. They've listened to me. They realize what's important to me, and they're starting off with the most important thing.
Yeah.
What a great way to start.
Brilliant. And on that note, what a great way to end our conversation. That's super. That was such an insightful chat, Neville. Thanks so much for coming in.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
I've got lots of notes, lots of takeaways, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to find that an absolute treasure trove of information. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you, and see you next time.